Well, I'm back in my cozy little dark room here. The weather outside is frightful here in Canada right now, so I am down in my dark room developing a whole whack of film from this summer. I have probably about 75 rolls of 120 film. I was on an artist residency in the month of September and I shot a bunch of film there. Plus I have about 50 or 60 sheets of 4x5 film and about 20 sheets of 8x10 film. So I am down here working hard. Haven't done a lot of YouTube videos this year because this year has been crazy. Absolutely non-stop busy since the end of March right up until November when I went to Paris Photo this year. I was lucky enough to go to Paris Photo. If you ever get a chance to go to Paris Photo, go. Paris Photo is always amazing. The interesting thing too about Paris Photo, a lot of the prints, and I would say 80% of the prints, especially black and white prints, are all traditional silver gelatin prints from the darkroom or some kind of handmade process. You see very few inkjet prints. You see more inkjet prints for color, but even the color stuff, a lot of it was shot on film. So that's kind of interesting at Paris Photo. I put out a video right before I went to Paris on Allan King, the ultra large format photographer. And one of the remarks, one of the comments that I received was, hey, we wanted a darkroom tour, we wanted to see his enlarger. So I called him up and I said, Allan, do you think you could show us or give us a tour of your darkroom? And today he was making a gigantic print. He is making a print from an 8x20 inch negative, and he says, why don't you come by, I'll give you a tour before we print and you can film me as I make the print. We are in Allan King's darkroom. It was amazing, that last video that we did. One of the big things that I think people wanted to see was a tour of his darkroom. We got so many comments on wanting to see his enlarger. So this is not just your regular darkroom where you develop 35mm film and make prints. This is an ultra large format darkroom. He does big, and I mean big, big negatives and big prints. I've never seen a process like this anywhere else, and I'm lucky to have Allan as a friend who's showing me his darkroom and his whole process, and he's gonna take you through his darkroom, his enlarger, and how he works with ultra large format. He does anywhere from 4x5, 5x7, 8x10, 8x20, and 12x20 inch film, which is gigantic film. Just a piece of that film costs what, $25, $30 US. Yeah. So it's a lot of money. You don't want to be making mistakes. So Allan, we will go on a little tour of your darkroom here.
Sure. Well, thank you for doing this, Todd. And first of all, this darkroom doubles as both for platinum printing and for black and white. This is, right now it's set up for, this is my platinum printer. It uses 12 blue light tubes here. And it has a vent there to keep the tubes cool and so on, a vacuum pump. And this is where I make the platinum print. So it's vacuum operated. And then we go over to basically the darkroom sink here.
And one of the things that you told me that you use for developing your negatives is Pyro.
Right.
Why do you use Pyro and why do you like it so much?
Pyro is, for black and white films, has the interesting characteristic. Actually, there's three things going on with Pyro. Pyrogallic acid, or Pyro as we call it. The first thing is that and the most important thing for me anyway, if I'm printing on multigrade papers, is that it tends to stain the gelatin. And it stains it. It happens in as the negative is being washed. The oxygen in the water starts to oxidize the pyro in the gelatin. It turns it this yellowish stain. Well, the yellowish stain actually is the concentration of yellowish stain in the film is proportional to the highlight. So what happens is when you develop a multigrade paper, you have a high concentration of yellow filtration in the highlights, which is where you actually need it to soften the contrast. The other thing about Pyro is that it is a very high accutance developer, and it has the tendency to immobilize the silver grains very quickly, so there's no migration. That increases the sharpness. I would say the big advantage for me when I'm working with these large negatives is the fact that I can develop my inspection under a very, very light or dark green safe light with a very, very lit illumination. And that lets me, when I'm developing the film, I can watch it as the highlights start to develop and so on. And when that happens, you can hold up the base side to the light and you can follow the development process. And of course, on a negative that large, it's not difficult. And then once the highlights come through to where you think you want it, not too strongly, not black, but just pretty much the tone you want it, then you're pretty much done. You go from there to the stop bath and then the fixer.
And the tones you get out of Pyro are amazing. You know what I saw in Paris? I saw Edward Weston's show, his original contact prints at the MEP Gallery in Paris.
Wow.
That were, some are almost 100 years old now, and they were absolutely amazing. The tonal range that he got was just, the prints are exquisite. And he used Pyro as well.
Right, and Edward Weston actually developed most of his in the old ABC Pyro, which was started up in the, I would say probably the early 20s, 1920s and so on, when silver was starting to become popular.
Now, obviously, you can't make your gigantic prints in this sink.
Right.
Your sink for making big prints is out here, so let's go take a look at that.
Sure, let's do that. The development sink starts life as basically a huge 4x8 piece of MDF board, and it's just got some rails on it here to keep the solutions. This is a little dam here which I built, depending on, you can put the length or the width of the paper and so on. And yeah, it's been lacquered and waterproofed and so on. And so the idea here is, when you develop, what we do is we expose the paper in the other darkroom, which I'll show you in a minute. Lay the paper down, anchor it into place with some steel bars, and then pour on the developer, the stop bath, and so on.
How much developer does it take to make a print?
Most of them, this size is about 15 liters. And the concept here is you don't move paper from one tray to the other, you move solutions. So what happens is, once you get very, very close to the end of the developing time, or stop or fixer and so on, then take out the dam there and just lift up the table, and the solutions flow out and they go back into the barrel again. So I also have here a compensating development timer from Zone 6 Studios in Vermont, which is no longer with us. Fred Pickard developed that one, by the way. And it has a probe here, and it's a compensating developing timer, which means that if your solutions is standardized for 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and if the solutions are a little warmer, then it speeds up the development time. If it's colder, it lengthens the development time. That's basically it. So yeah, and here's the different solutions we're going to use. This is the developer, the stop bath, the fixer, H2O wash to start with, to clean off as much of the fixer as you can. Move to hypo clearing agent, and then selenium toner. Washing is actually quite straightforward. It's basically nothing more than a garden hose, which we fasten to here, and it just flows water, and the water flows out into the drain. This 8x10 enlarger, which I use for the 8x10 and 5.7 and 4.5, and it has a vacuum easel on it as well. and it uses perforated metal there, and it draws the air out and sucks. I don't use the easel too often, but this vacuum easel holds it really, really tight. And I wish that I could build a vacuum easel for this guy here, which is what's projected on. This is what I use to enlarge my 12 by 20 negatives and 8 by 20. And this particular enlarger actually started life as an old process camera. If we go to the other side there, we can see multi-lith camera. Yeah, so that's how it started life. And it was actually Bill Peters, who was the CEO of the Calgary Science Center in about 2000. I met him and I said, Bill, I'd sure like to be able to enlarge these 12 by 20 and larger negatives. And he says, well, I've got an old process camera in my basement. Let's see what we can do. And so this part of the enlarger here is the original process camera, along with the rail here and the track and so on. And the rest is Bill Peters' innovations. It sits on a box, which again sits on the rails, and you can move the camera back and forth depending on the size you want to produce on the print. The back of the camera, inside here, I'm not going to open up right now, but inside here are 2 fans for cooling, and there's also 12 fluorescent tubes there with a specific spectral frequency for the black and white. And I really like this Metrolux darkroom timer here because it has a probe which goes into the light chamber, and it lets me know if, for example, the tubes are getting a little worn or getting aged. Then it compensates. And as the tubes get dimmer and dimmer and so on, then it compensates a little bit. Then when it goes up beyond that, when it goes out of limit, then we change the tubes. But it's sort of like also a compensating developing timer, if you will. This is an 8 by 10 film holder. It uses, it's actually made from MDF board also, and it has its 2 pieces of glass, and the glass sandwiches the negative in there. I can also mask it if I want to put in 5 by 7, but I rarely do that. So that's there's also one for 12 by 20, which is in the enlarger currently. But this is the concept, and it uses a museum glass, which is, how can I say, it's a coated glass actually, so it's pretty free from Newton's rings and that. So this is the idea behind the film holder. Now the lens that's in here is a 360 millimeter Rotagon made by Rodenstock. I seriously doubt you can find these anymore, except maybe on eBay. And I found that this particular lens gives me the coverage I need for 12 by 20. So this is the easel. Basically, it's just, again, it's a piece of a large MDF board. And I use magnets to hold the paper on. And we get it as flat as we possibly can. And as I mentioned, I'd dearly love to make a vacuum easel on this thing, but it's sort of beyond my capability right now. But we can get it quite flat, and we stop down the lens as much as we can to take care of any imperfections. So this is the size of the paper we're going to be working with today. It's about 42 inches by 69 inches. And the negative we're going to produce the print is the one we shot on top of Mount Fairview end of June. And it's going to end up being about this size by about that length there. So
direct me as needed.
Okay, well, I think we're going to be, I actually cut up 2 pieces of paper. Hopefully we'll be able to make 2 prints today. When you screw up on something this size, that's why I do so many test prints to make sure that the amount of screw-ups are minimized, right?
Yeah.
You want to get it my size, or something like this, right? As much as you can. I'd like to get the sky just a little bit darker than it was.
25 seconds left.
And let's see.
What kind of developer are you using for
It's
this?
D72. It's diluted 1:4. When you dilute it that much, the development time's longer, and as you can see by the process here, we need a bit longer time, just because of the way the whole thing gets manipulated, right, and working through all these characteristics here. And you can sort of move it like that.
Straight up?
Just lift it straight up and put it somewhere you can find it later.
Okay.
Because I control everything. And I'm in control from beginning. I control the exposure, I control the composition, I control the film, I control the contrast, I control everything I want. But what I like about the black and white is the continuous tone. It's not this pixelated images, it's all continuous. And the blacks are exactly where I want it. I can manipulate the contrast in the snow and a lot of the areas like that. I can dodge the shadows. I can get the shadows where I want. I can make them really dramatic shadows. I can do all this sort of thing. This gives me what I refer to always as that sense of presence. In other words, I can, it almost looks like I can step from here and just keep walking. I can walk into the print. I can't do that with anything else. And what I found was the larger the format, the greater that sense of presence, the greater that depth. So.
And now we're back in my darkroom again. I'm gonna get back to work developing film. And how cool is that? Seeing that 8 by 20 inch negative and seeing that gigantic print that he make. The guy is a master darkroom printer. I love his photography and just his whole aesthetic, how he shoots, and he's keeping everything alive with this ultra large format photography. I'm back gonna try to do a lot more YouTube videos, especially over the winter. We have a few trips planned. I'm gonna do stuff like that. But this past summer was just so crazy. I had zero time to do YouTube. Good to be back. See you next time. Cheers.